Hi everyone, so we are back with another tutorial video, and in this video we will be covering AWS S3, which is Simple Storage Service. And in this video we will be covering the following points. We will be looking at what is AWS S3, we will be looking at use cases for S3, we will be looking what are the types of storage classes in S3. We'll also be looking at the definitions of availability and durability and how we can achieve both these availability and durability in AWS S3. We will see what are buckets and objects in S3. We'll have a look at the additional features that S3 provides. And then for the hands-on part, we will be creating an S3 bucket where we will upload some files. So this is going to be an interesting topic. So stay tuned and let's just jump right in. So what is AWS S3? S3 it stands for Simple Storage Service, and AWS S3 is an object storage inside AWS built to store and retrieve any amount of data from anywhere, be it websites, mobile apps, corporate applications, data from IoT sensors or any other devices, any electronic devices. So we can say that it is an object built storage built to store any amount of data. Now let's look at few major key points related to S3. So we can store any type of file in S3. We can store media files, be it photos, videos. We can store data files like CSV files, JSON files, Avro files, XML files, etc. 3 is designed to deliver 11 nines of durability, which is 99.99s. So we can see that it is highly durable and it stores data for millions of applications used by market leaders in every industry. So S3 is widely used throughout the world by millions of applications. It provides comprehensive security and compliance capabilities that even meet the most stringent regulatory requirements. S3 it gives customers flexibility in the way they manage data for cost optimization, access control and compliance. So S3 is quite handy object storage option when it comes to cost optimization, access control or compliance. We can choose between various S3 storage classes to meet our cost optimization requirement. We can also control the access control for our S3 buckets through ACLs, through IAM roles. Talking about the size of files, files can be anywhere of the size between 0 bytes to 5 terabytes, which is quite a huge size. And there is unlimited storage available in S3 provided the file size should be between 0 to 5 terabytes. Okay, so now moving on, a few use cases of S3 would be backup and storage. We provide data backup and storage devices for others. Application hosting provides services that deploy, install, and manage web applications. S3 is also used for media hosting, like we can build a redundant, scalable, and highly available infrastructure to host photos, videos, or music uploads and downloads. S3 is also used to achieve software delivery, so we can host our software applications that can be downloaded or used by customers. And a typical use case of S3 is the static website hosting. So we can configure a static website to run from an S3 bucket. We will see how we can do all these in the consequent lectures. So here on the screen is a typical use case scenario for AWS S3. On the left hand side, we have data coming from multiple sources, like we have the analytics data, or we can have log files, we can have application data, we can have videos and pictures, or we can have some data related to backup and archival. So these are the client side applications that might be wanting to send some data into Amazon S3 for storage. So we can store all these types of data in our S3 bucket. All these data can be pushed inside of an S3 bucket. We can create a bucket. We can specify the region, access controls, and management options, which are the options we get when we are trying to create any bucket and trying to upload files inside of my S3 bucket. Any S3 bucket, it also provides us with many options, like we can control the access to data. We can optimize the cost of storage through storage classes. We can replicate data to any region. We can enable versioning inside of my bucket. We can access the stored data from the on-premises or from the VPC. S3 is quite secure, so we get the feature of the secure data. So these are the few options that we get whenever we are trying to upload and store data in S3. And being an end user, if I want to play with my data, if I want to have some analysis of my data, or let's suppose if I want to perform any manipulation of my data, we can do that. Let's suppose if I want to perform some AI algorithms on my data, we can use the data for advanced analytics. We can also prepare an ML model for my data. Basically, we can use that data for any kind of analysis options. In AWS, we also have AWS Athena, which is used to perform queries on the stored data. So this was a particular store and retrieve mechanism for AWS S3. We saw the kind of data that we can store in AWS S3. We saw the options that we get whenever we are trying to store the data, like controlling the access, replicating data, versioning of data. We can have multiple storage classes, which we will see, and the kind of analysis and manipulation that I want to perform on the stored data inside of my S3 bucket. Okay, so talking about storage classes in AWS S3, it offers us a range of storage classes designed for different use cases. So based on your use case, based on your requirement, you can go ahead and choose any of the following storage classes. We have S3 standard, which is the most widely used. And talking about S3 standard, it is the most durable, immediately available, and frequently accessed storage class. So S3 standard is the best option to choose when you have data that is to be frequently accessed and you want that data to be immediately available. Now, next we have the S3 intelligent tiering, and this storage class, it automatically moves data to the most cost effective tier. We just have to provide this as the storage class option for the bucket level. We have the standard IA, we have the S3 standard IA, which stands for S3 standard infrequent access, which is nothing but a cost optimized version of the S3 standard. And data stored in S3 standard IA storage class is also durable, immediately available. Choose this storage class when we want infrequent access to our stored data. Then we have the S3 one zone IA, which stands for S3 one zone infrequent access. In this storage class, it comes with lower cost for infrequently accessed data with less resilience, since, as the name signifies, the data stored in this S3 one zone IA storage class will be stored only in one region, in one zone. So that's why we can see that it comes with less resiliency. We have the S3 Glacier Instant Retrieval. So Glacier is a class when we have data that is to be stored for a longer period of time, like archived data. We can say that that is the type of data that is to be stored in the Glacier storage classes. We have three types of Glacier storage class. We have the instant retrieval, we have the flexible retrieval, and we have the deep archive. So let's look into all of these one by one. So talking about S3 Glacier Instant Retrieval, in this storage class, we store the data that is rarely accessed and requires retrieval in milliseconds. Talking about Flexible Retrieval, in this storage class, we store the archive data and the data whose retrieval times can vary between minutes to hours. Talking about S3 Glacier Deep Archive, this storage class comes with the lowest storage cost for long-term retention. So we saw that we have a variety of storage classes options to choose from whenever we are talking about AWS S3. Now, in this diagram, it gives you a more detailed picture on the storage classes. So we have the storage classes that we just discussed, like talking about S3 standard. In this, we store active frequently accessed data. We get a millisecond level of access for the data, and the data stored in S3 standard is stored in more than 3 availability zones. The cost for using this S3 standard storage class, it comes to be $0.02 per gigabytes of data stored. Talking about intelligent tiering, in this storage class, we store the data that comes with changing access patterns. So let's suppose if I have some data that I'm not sure about the access pattern about. So in those cases, it is recommended to go for the intelligent tiering so that once my data is not accessed for a longer period of time, it can be transitioned from one storage class to another storage class. And this transitioning, AWS takes care of itself. We just have to specify that we will be using the intelligent tiering storage class. This storage class also comes with millisecond level of access for the data, also stores data in more than 3 availability zones. The cost of storing data in intelligent tiering comes to be $0.02 to $0.01 per gigabytes of data stored. Talking about standard infrequent access storage class, this is used to store data that has infrequent access. It also provides us with milliseconds access, comes with 3 or more availability zones. The cost, we can see that it is a little less than the S3 standard, which is $0.0125 per gigabytes of data stored. And in this S3 standard IA, we also have to pay for a retrieval fee per gigabytes of data. So whenever we are trying to retrieve data from this S3 standard IA, we do have to pay a very small amount of retrieval fee, and that retrieval fee is calculated in per gigabytes of data retrieved. Talking about one zone IA, in this we store data that can be recreatable or less accessed data. Here also we get a millisecond access, and as the name signifies, the data stored in this class is only available in a single availability zone. The cost of storing data in this storage class is also quite low as compared to S3 standard, and that is $0.01 per gigabytes of data stored. Here also we have to pay a small retrieval fee. And similarly, we can see the options for S3 Glacier and S3 Glacier Deep Archive. So whenever we are talking about archive data, S3 Glacier is the most recommended storage class to go for. We have to pay quite less amount of storage charges whenever we are talking about Glacier type of storage classes, and based on your requirement of data access you can choose between multiple subcategories of the Glacier storage class. Like if you want to access your data within minutes or hours, you can go for S3 Glacier. If you want to access your data that can be accessed in a time period between hours, you can go for the Glacier Deep Archive. For Glacier we have a storage charge of $0.004 per gigabytes, and for Glacier Deep Archive we have the storage charge of $0.0009 per gigabyte. Okay, so I hope storage classes concept was pretty clear. So let's move on and let's have a look at what is availability and durability. So whenever we are talking about services or technologies, or we can say storages, applications, availability of any service, it measures how readily available a service is. And talking about durability, so durability is the factor used to measure the likelihood of data loss. We will see both these concepts in regards to AWS S3 storage classes, but for now just keep in mind availability is related to the availability of any particular service, and durability is the factor used to measure the likelihood of data loss. So in all the storage classes, we can measure the durability and availability, which is the highest in AWS S3 standard. That is, we get a durability of 11 nines in S3 standard and a availability of 4 nines. In S3 intelligent tiering, we also have quite a high durability, and availability is also pretty good, which is 99.9% over a given year. Similarly, for multiple storage classes, we have different availability and durability. So we can see that S3 standard is the most optimal option whenever we are talking about durability and availability. So if you have some highly sensitive data, in that case, S3 standard is the recommended storage class. Although all the storage classes, they do have quite a nice factor of durability and availability. Okay, so this was availability and durability concept in AWS S3 storage classes. Now talking about S3 buckets and objects, let's see what are buckets inside of S3 and what are objects inside of S3. So a bucket, an AWS S3 bucket, it is a public cloud storage resource available inside of AWS S3 platform. It provides object-based storage. So think of a bucket like a folder in your local directory, a folder in your personal laptops or computers, where we do store files, medias, etc. So it's just a folder like structure except for the difference that is it is present in the cloud premises and not in your local directory. We can create buckets. We can also provide access controls to who can access that bucket. We can upload files inside of the buckets. Okay, so talking about bucket naming convention, they must follow a set of rules like names must be unique across all of AWS. So you cannot have two buckets of a similar name. Your bucket name must be unique across all the AWS. The length of any bucket name, it should be between 3 to 63 characters. The bucket name, it only contains lowercase letters, numbers, and hyphens. So anything apart from all this is not accepted in the bucket naming, and the bucket names, they cannot be formatted as an IP address. So hope the concept of bucket was clear. It is nothing but a folder like structure, except it is available in the cloud, and we can also control the access to who can access my bucket, and we can also enable versioning replication of data inside my bucket, which we will be seeing in the hands-on tutorial. And now talking about objects, so the objects are the fundamental entities of the data storage in S3 buckets. So consider objects as the data that you're trying to store in any AWS S3 bucket. So let's suppose if you are trying to store any picture, in that case, the picture will be acting as an object. If you're trying to store any CSV file, in that case, the CSV file will be acting as an object, which is to be stored in the S3 bucket. And going into more details, an object, it consists of key, which is the name of the object, a value, which is the data made up of a sequence of bytes. Object also consists of a version ID, which is used for versioning, and metadata, which is data about the data that is stored. So we'll see what is key, value, version ID when we create objects once we enable versioning inside of my bucket. Okay, so the last theory point, we will be seeing what is AWS S3 additional features. So S3 is quite an interesting storage options, which also provides us many additional features. Let's have a look at all of them. S3 provides us with the transfer acceleration feature, which speeds up data uploads using cloud front in reverse. So if you have a requirement where you want to upload data quickly, so in that case, you can go for transfer acceleration service. We also get the option to choose whether the requester pays for the bucket, for the storage of the bucket, for the retrieval of data from the bucket. And this feature is known as requester pays feature inside of S3. We get the options of tags inside of my buckets. So tags are quite critical whenever we are trying to create any resource in cloud computing platform, which can be used later on for costing, billing, security purposes. We do get events inside of my S3. So events are used to trigger notifications to any SNS event, which is nothing but simple notification service, to any SQS queue, which is simple queue service, or any Lambda when certain events happen in your bucket. So we'll be seeing at how we can create events and how we can trigger any SNS, SQS, or Lambda events inside of my S3. And we have already discussed S3 is also used for static website hosting, from which we can simply build simple and massively scalable static website hosting. So these are a few additional features whenever we are talking about S3. So we get to see that S3 is quite an interesting storage option inside of my AWS Cloud platform, comes with multiple storage classes, comes with multiple additional features, and based on your requirement, you can also choose between the storage classes. Okay, so the theory part is done. Now let's come to the hands-on. We'll see how we can create buckets inside of AWS, and we will also be uploading files inside of my AWS S3 bucket. So let me just quickly jump onto my browser. I will quickly log into my AWS account. So I'm trying to log in as the root user. You can also choose between root user and IAM user. I typed in the password. Now let's sign in so that we can log into the AWS management console. Okay, so I'm logged in into my AWS management console. So to choose S3, either we can go for services, and in services, we can choose the category of storage. And in storage, we get to see that here we do have S3. But me personally, I like to choose from the search box. So this is the search box that the management console gives us. In here, I'll just type S3, and from here, I'll just click on S3. So once the page loads up, we can see that in the right screen, we get the option to create bucket. We also get a little message that every object in S3 it is stored in a bucket. To upload files and folders to S3, you will be need to create a bucket where the objects will be stored. Okay, so we already know that. Let's click on this create bucket option. So when we try to create a bucket, we have to provide some configurations like the bucket name, the region where I want to create my bucket. Do I want to copy settings from existing bucket optional? Okay, so let's fill in one by one. For the bucket name, I'll just give a name which should be unique across AWS. So we hope that is unique. Okay, so for the region, I will be choosing this region, which is Asia Pacific, Mumbai, AP South 1. That looks good. For now, I'll just have ACLs disabled, and in the consequent lectures, we will be seeing what are ACLs and how we can enable ACLs as access control list so that we have more granular level control on the bucket, on the files that are being uploaded to my bucket. For now, we'll just be going with the default, that is ACLs disabled. We can also enable or disable the public access settings for the bucket. Like if I want to enable the public access so that the files present inside my bucket can be accessed from anyone, in that case, I will just untick this option. But for now, I do not want to provide the public access for this bucket. So I'll just click on this and I block the public access settings for this bucket. So the bucket, it will not be accessed publicly now. For the bucket versioning, we'll leave it to disabled. In the consequent lectures, we will be seeing what is bucket versioning in details. But for now, we'll be going with the default option, that is disable versioning. Tags also will leave it to default. Now talking about encryption, we also get the option of encrypting our data inside of my S3 bucket. So we can see that server side encryption is automatically applied to new objects stored in this bucket. And the encryption key type, it is S3 managed keys. So we can choose from two options, the S3 managed keys, or we can create new service key using the AWS key management service. I'll just go ahead with the default one, which is the S3 managed key. Now let me just quickly click on this advanced settings. So we do get the feature of object lock, which store objects using a write once, read many model, which is worm model. For now, we'll just leave it to disabled. And once done, we'll just go ahead with create bucket. Oops, we cannot use underscore in the bucket name. I hope that works. Let's click on create bucket. Okay, so the bucket is successfully created. And in here, we get to see the details of the bucket, like the name, the region that is created in, the access level of my bucket, and creation date. So we have created a bucket inside of my AWS. Now let's try to upload a few files in my AWS bucket, which I've just created. So for that, I will just click on this bucket to navigate inside of this bucket. And we can see that there are currently no objects inside of my bucket. You don't have any objects in this bucket. So let's upload a few objects. Okay, so I have a JSON file which is present in my local directory, which I want to upload to that bucket. So we can see that we have a file musical instrument.json, and I want to upload this file into my S3 bucket. So how can we do that? Inside of my bucket, we do get the option to upload. So I'll just click on this upload button. From here, we have to choose add files option if we want to upload files. We also get the option to add folders. So we can create folders inside of folders inside my AWS bucket. But for now, I'll just go ahead with the add files option. I'll just navigate to the downloads folder, and here we have our file. Just select that, open it. So once we have selected the file, we see that we get a destination in which my file will be uploaded. We also get a few other options like the destination details, default encryption type, the object lock feature, permissions, and properties. So inside of properties, we can select from storage classes. So if you navigate down, you get to see that we do have all the storage classes like standard, intelligent tiering, standard IA, one zone IA, all the glacier subtypes. For now, I'll just leave it to standard. Server-side encryption, I will leave it to default. And once done, I'll just click on this upload. So the upload is succeeded. And let's close this once. And in here, we see that our file is uploaded. So we have just now created a bucket and uploaded a JSON file inside of my AWS S3 bucket. Now I'll try to add one more file. Let's try to add a picture inside of my S3 bucket. So once again, I'll just click on this upload, click on add files, and I have a smiley picture which I will be uploading in the bucket. So let's just select that, click on open, leaving all the options to default. I'll click on upload and the upload is succeeded. So let's close this and we can see that we have two files inside of my bucket which I just now created. We have a PNG file which is a picture and we have a JSON file. So this was how we can create buckets and upload files inside of my AWS S3 buckets. Now let me quickly jump back to the tutorial. So we have seen how we can create S3 bucket and how we can upload files. Okay, so the key takeaways from this lecture, we have seen what is AWS S3. We have seen the use cases for AWS S3. We have seen what are the various storage classes in S3. We have seen the definitions of availability and durability and what factors do they play an important role whenever we are talking about storage classes, how we can achieve how various storage classes provide us different levels of availability and durability. We have seen what are buckets and objects in S3. We have also seen a few additional features of S3 like the transfer acceleration, requester pace feature, events inside of my S3. And for the hands-on part, we have seen how we can create an S3 bucket and how we can upload files inside of my S3 bucket. So that was it for this tutorial. And in the next tutorial, we will be looking at other properties inside of my S3, like how we can enable versioning, what is versioning inside of S3, how we can enable data replication, how we can create multiple storage classes, the transition of objects from one storage class to another storage class. We'll be seeing the worm model, the write once, read many model. Okay, so there is exciting stuff to be coming on this channel. So make sure to subscribe and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.